Welcome to the BOLO Podcast, where we bring you insightful discussions on all things related to Black business, leadership and current affairs. Proudly brought to you in association with Camden Council, our aim is to shed light on matters concerning London, the UK and their impact across the diaspora. Join us as we delve into the inspiring stories of the people on the ground, creating dreams and seizing opportunities, paving the way for a brighter future. We also engage with decision makers who play a vital role in shaping policies, ensuring a conducive environment for the growth and success of Black business. Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected, stay informed, and together, let's make a difference. So, welcome. My name is Alex Emigapo, co-founder of Black Owned London, and I'm joined with
Martin Wilson, also co-founder of Black Owned London.
And today our special guests are
Cherelle. I'm a prosecutor, living in London, working in London, and just here to give my input.
Amazing. And
Hi, I'm Leslie Rowe, and my job title is Education, Employment and Training Advisor, and I work in Islington's Leave and Care Service and have done for the last 23 years.
Amazing. So, we tend to dive at the start into your journeys. It can be a highlighted journey into how you got into your roles. So we'll start with you, Leslie.
Just a little bit about yourselves and then your journey. So everything from where you grew up in that sense, and then your journey up to where you are now.
Okay.
Just give us a bit of background.
Yes, so I grew up in South London, was born in Lewisham, moved to Deptford as a young child, went to school in Brockley, secondary school, and there I met people like Ian Wright. We played in the same school side, same Sunday league side. Interestingly enough, I was born in 1964, so at that time in Deptford it was pretty rough, especially as we lived right close to Millwall football ground, and so every weekend when there was a game on, all of the high street was boarded up. You know, you literally didn't go out because it was football at that time. It wasn't particularly Millwall, but it was just football at that time. And interestingly enough, as an 8-year-old, my dad said to me, "You need to be off the street. You need to be doing something. So I'm going to sign you up to a football club." And that's actually where I met Ian Wright. We played in the same side, and Danny Wallace as well. Played in the same Sunday league side.
Better than both of them, yeah.
Both of them, yeah. Interestingly enough, and interesting enough about that is that it's such a funny thing, life, because Danny's brothers, Rodney and Raymond, who went on to play football as well, the twins, they used to come and watch us. That's quite surreal in many ways. And then, I left school at 16. I wasn't really sure about what I wanted to do. I wasn't really interested in school, in all honesty, even though I have a family history of kind of education. My aunt is a superhead. She ran 2 secondary schools. My uncle was my French teacher at school. But interestingly enough, when you get bought French books for Christmas and birthdays, actually, it wasn't necessarily as inspiring maybe as they thought it would be. And so I left school at 16, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My father at the time was running a youth and community centre. He said, "Why don't you come down and work for the summer?" I did, and I never really left. And so I've worked in a variety of settings, from children's homes to working with homeless to running a youth and community centre. And now I'm at Islington Council, and my remit is education, employment and training. And I've been doing that for the last 23 years. And parallel to that, obviously, I've been kind of helping my son through a journey through football. And so my son is Arsenal's number 10 in Mill Smith Rowe. And so I've had that journey as well.
I've heard he's a good player. I heard he's all right.
Some say. Yeah, some say. Some say. I think he gets it from his dad.
Yeah, mostly. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Cherelle?
My journey is I grew up in East London. Always wanted to be a lawyer from as little as I could remember. I think it was the wigs and the gown that really fascinated me at a young age, if I'm being honest. But as I got older, I got to realise what they actually do, and I was always fascinated by the whole idea of being a lawyer. So obviously I've gone through the ranks, I've gone through uni, I was going to say school, college, then uni. And then obviously it is tough getting in, especially as a person of colour. So I had many barriers to face. I actually left London to get into a law firm briefly. Wow. So I was in Hertfordshire to try and get into a law firm. And I managed to get into one, kept building from there, built my experience, came back to London, worked in defence very briefly. No, not briefly, about 5 years. Okay. Qualified there, and then I've moved over to prosecution. It's a bit strange because obviously there's a stigma, but slowly, with every person I speak to, I change their opinion.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. A stigma around what?
Yeah.
About being a black prosecutor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to expand on that for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, you work for the police, you're a snitch, you're this and you're that, you put people in prison. But there's so much more.
That's the idea of it, sorry. But it's true. It's true.
Yeah, but it does boil down to ignorance a little bit, because sometimes when we don't know something, we just go off of what we heard or what we think someone does. But there's a lot more to my job than putting people in prison. There's times where I review cases primarily for work. Okay. So I'll look at the evidence, and if it's not there, then I'm not going to prosecute. Right. So my job isn't necessarily to put people in prison. Sometimes you're actually saving someone, because it might, if it's a teenager, for instance, it could be that one scare that makes them think, I'm not doing that again. I got off, I was lucky, I'm not doing that again. Do you know what I mean? So, it's just trying to challenge the stigma, really.
And just two things in terms of one your journey, just for those who may not know, who want to understand what the stages are to become a lawyer in that sense. You finish uni, do you have to do law school, or is that you do that at a firm?
It's changed a little bit now. Okay. When I was doing it, it was like the training contract, that was the old way. But now there's an SQE, so you go to uni, you can actually study pretty much anything. Yeah. If you don't do law, you can do a conversion course in law school, and then you keep going. And I'm not sure exactly how the SQE works. If anyone's interested, they can look into it. But you don't need a training contract anymore, which was a requirement when I did it. No. Now you can work whilst doing this course at law school. Right, okay. It's a little bit different. Okay. And then you're qualified.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said you went straight into defence.
Yeah.
Was that on purpose or just coincidence, or?
I really did want to end up there. I did want to, but it was a coincidence the way that it happened.
Okay.
I feel like I'm a Christian, so I feel like it was God's divine timing. I moved to an area. I applied for multiple jobs. I was actually trying to leave law at the time, so I was applying for accounting. Okay. And I went to a church, and the pastor said to me in front of everyone, "You're going to be a lawyer," and I was like, "No, I'm doing accounting now." And he was like, "That's what you think." Yeah. So when I moved, I got a email. And it was a job interview. And then it was a solicitor's firm. And I was like, okay, how did this happen? Right. Looked into it more, because I only ever did conveyancing, because that's the easiest thing to get into at that time. Right. And I was bored. That's why I was leaving. And then when I looked into the firm, it was a criminal defence firm. And I was like, okay. Went to the interview. I didn't even get to my car. He called me and said, I want you to work here. Oh, wow. So, yeah, it was crazy the way it happened.
Wow. Okay, amazing. And last thing I want to say is, I said there's barriers to it. Did you find that in the case of being a woman as well, or was that just
100%? Yeah, 100%.
That's quick.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's more male dominated in that sense. Yeah. Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you both for that, for the introductions. Very interesting introductions, and perfect. And I'm sure you guys will have some crossover in some of the people you've worked with and some of the experiences and stories you've had. So that'd be amazing to come onto that in a short bit.
Yeah. Well, I think. One of the things that you mentioned is youth work. How important has that been in your career in terms of working with youth, helping youth develop, and how important is it for London, do you feel?
Well, I mean, youth work in the strict sense of the word really doesn't exist anymore in many ways, because a lot of the budgets are being cut for kind of what I would have grown up on, venture playgrounds, youth clubs, that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of money for that so much now. And so that gave me really a grounding of kind of like relationships, interpersonal skills, thinking about how you communicate with people. And then you kind of think about the underlying issues as to why people are there as well. Because, if we're talking about, say, care leavers, they're overrepresented in, obviously, custodial, youth offending, mental health, young mothers, drug and alcohol misuse, and they're all things that obviously cut across your profession as well, you know. So you'll see a lot of young people as a result of those issues coming before, you know, a judge or a magistrate or whatever. So we're dealing with kind of the fallout of that as well, and how that kind of affects young people moving forward, because young people in the care system, they necessarily move into independence a lot earlier than your traditional young person. So they're moving into flats at 18 and a half, 19, and generally because of their journey and their detachment from their family as such, that's a real struggle. I mean, it would be a real struggle for anybody. I mean, you know, leaving home at 18 and a half, 19 and having to fend for yourself in a flat, you know. So, yeah, we have quite a lot of crossover in that respect. But also it's kind of like my thing is I really want to give stuff back, you know. And so I feel like I'm in a position where I've got 40 odd years of experience that I can bring to bear. But I'm also kind of really good at kind of using my resources as well. I think that's an essential thing. And one of the things I'm trying to do in Islington is think about kind of how all the employees are kind of like the corporate parents of the children that we look after, and how they bring all these skills, but they also bring these assets as well. You know, so I reach out to friends who are builders, I reach out to friends who are in the clothing industry and places like that where I can actually direct young people to get opportunities. So for me, that's a real big thing. And, you know, I have a community interest company, I work with clothing brands, I work with lots of other businesses to think about how I can incentivise, but also kind of give opportunities to young people that I work with.
Amazing. What would you say? And I know you said, because you said, you know, there's been lots of cuts. What's that done to the landscape of things in terms of how things look now in that sense? Yeah,
and I think things have necessarily changed in terms of technology's changed. So you couldn't necessarily go back to my day where it was just like a pool table or table tennis table and arts and crafts in the corner. It's like you couldn't go back to that. Okay. But I think, you know, there are just not the places where you can kind of hang and kind of just chill out with people. You know, when I grew up, there wasn't such a thing as postcode wars, so I could literally get on the bus, and you might even remember this, but you could get a red bus Rover and you could just go from one end of the line to the other. You could turn around and come back, and I could do that all over London. And we just go see the sights, come back. Never really had any issues with people, never got beaten up as a result of it, was never told that I was in the wrong area kind of thing. So those were not things I really had to think about, whereas I work with some young people that they can't even cross the road because literally it goes into another postcode or literally it goes into another estate. Right. And so that's where obviously that kind of mental health impact is felt most, because, you know, imagine how small your world must be if you struggle to go into another estate or to cross a road. I mean, that makes your world really small, and then as a result of that you become quite insular. And so if I'm thinking about, say, a college course for a young person, the first question I have to ask is, are there any areas that you can't go into? I mean, literally.
Didn't even think of that.
Right. That's a sad question.
You know, it's my first question, because I don't want to put them in danger or in an area that they struggle with. You know, so imagine you know, me and you, we go to work every day. Sometimes I drive. Usually I go by the train. Doesn't bother me. I get on the train at one end, I go for the other end, I go around on a bus every so often to visit. You know, imagine trying to think about how do I get to a particular area, because I've got to go through A, B, and C, D as an area where I might ultimately at the wrong end get stabbed, say, for instance. And that's a real struggle for me.
Is there awareness of that at a kind of governmental and borough level? Are the authorities aware of that? And
yes, but it's kind of how do you... So, for instance, I'm part of my journey with my son becoming a footballer at 11 years old. The journey had become so insurmountable in terms of the time it was taking. So I'm commuting from Thornton Heath to Islington, working, coming back to Thornton Heath, picking him up and the car to go all the way back to Walthamstow for him to train, coming back again to Thornton Heath, he's asleep, you're putting him into bed, you know, and then you think to yourself, oh, actually, do you know what? Our older son had gone off to university already and done that. That was fine. We could actually move, but we could move because we had the means to move. We had our own house. So if you're stuck on a council flat and you don't have the means to move, how does that affect you as well? Could someone else have done that same journey? Maybe not in that way. It doesn't mean to say they wouldn't necessarily have made it, but you have choices. You know, in that respect.
It's really interesting, because what you're talking about there is the barriers that we don't necessarily think about. It's more than just the obvious barriers. Do you know what I mean? It's actually a situation of logistical barriers.
Yes.
And some of the financial barriers. And I think that's interesting to me as well. Just the fact that what you talked about with the cuts to certain funding and the rest of it, and how that's impacted situations, and then obviously some of the crime that's evolved out of that aspect, and how that affects things. It's really interesting. I guess as well. Feel free to chip in. So if you feel like you come across some of these things,
no, definitely, I resonate with a lot.
But what I guess the question is from us to you is like, what's the attitude from a legal perspective about these things? Is it just seen as almost? I guess the analogy I can use is how a hospital might deal with an infection.
Like just part of the job.
It's rather than seen as like a great, because if I take, because it's a field I work in, I can say something like maybe diabetes. We could argue about there's ways to solve this rather than just giving people medication. Do you know what I mean? But some people will say, well, that's not our job here. Our job here is just to give them the medication and heal them. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In the sense, the legal sense, I'm trying to use that analogy. Is it a situation where these things come to your desk or your computer, and is it just that you aren't really able to view it larger than it is, or you just have to view it as it comes, if that makes sense?
It is as it comes, because at the point that someone's come to my desk, they've already probably committed a crime or been accused of committing a crime. Okay. So there's not much intervention we can do, but I resonate with a lot of what you said, because the police, there's a lot of prosecutors that have never crossed paths with teenagers, people from London even, and they don't understand what it means to be a Londoner. So with someone like myself, I get it. So when I see certain cases, I'm like, oh, I understand this person, I understand where you come from, I can relate to you. Not every prosecutor can. And this is why I think it's so important to have someone like myself there, because you can relate to the kid that the newspaper makes look like is a monster. Do you know, does that make sense? If they make him look like a monster, I can relate to him because I'm from where you're from. And the police are quite good. People think that they're out to just get people. Some probably are, I'm not going to say they're not, but there are some officers that will explain to you, like, look, this is a kid and he's just caught up in the wrong crowd, and they will go through the whole rigmarole of you so you know a bit of background about this kid, because they know more than we do.
No, I see.
And then it's for me to make a decision then based on on the evidence and what I've got about this kid. But intervention-wise, there's not really much we can do at that stage. I mean, we can ask the police to refer them to certain agencies, but then it's, does this kid want to cooperate? And then also, are we putting him in danger by him having to travel to this place? Exactly like what you've just said. So.
And have you seen, again, and that's another landscape question for you, have you seen with, obviously we talk about cost of living crisis, all these other things, have you seen a rise in certain types of crime? It's not all that your job's involved with, but I guess we've seen how it goes. So in terms of crime in the last maybe few years in regards to the way what people have to hand funding wise, have you seen there been a rise in particular types of situations?
Definitely. It's a mixed bag in my job, because you don't know what you're going to get on any day. Yeah. And what I get necessarily doesn't necessarily mean that it's
reflect everything.
A full So
okay.
But I have seen a lot of thefts going up, which I'm not surprised about.
I can understand that.
But it doesn't make it right. But
no, I can see that.
I get why.
Yeah. So do I. I definitely understand that.
Just touching on something, it's also important that when young people are coming through the system, they see people that reflect them as well. That's really important. It's so important to be able to see.
I think we've had that throughout. Which for everyone, we've talked about representation matters. I think that messaging does get through to everyone that representation matters. But I think people don't understand how important it really is. Do you know what I mean? It's not just because it's not that people. I think it's the last episode. I said the thing is what we don't want is every single person to be a trailblazer. Do you know what I mean? It has to be at some point where this is just the norm for anyone who wants to do it, because there are trailblazers. There are always going to be trailblazers, and there's people who these are the first person to really take that step in that direction, and we honour them, and it's great to have them, but I don't want it to be the next person is also then basically another trailblazer, and it's just it's always seen as a what do you call it, the exception to the rule, or normally, rather than it's just once this path was set, everyone was able to follow with relative ease. But I think representation does, unfortunately, play a big role in it, but it's hard to achieve that all the time, because you're effectively hoping that those in it continue to do that, and then more of them come through. And I think that's what we found is probably the hardest part, is how do you incorporate that into places? How do you incorporate that places without it becoming apparently unfair, or people giving it the idea that you're only here because of the tokenistic nature of it.
Definitely.
But even passing through that.
Sorry.
But even passing through just what's been said here, like just understanding things like postcodes, wars, these zones that create that, and passing the baton in terms of you having the capacity to actually understand it's not just these supposed crimes on a piece of paper. You understand the person behind that.
Yeah.
That in itself raises the importance of understanding of the representation from. But I actually had a question around. So, you alluded to it before when Martin asked, female prosecutor, black female prosecutor. What are you seeing, if anything at all, within your sector, of how, if it's being addressed, is it being addressed, is it being looked at, is it being acknowledged, is it of note and importance for there to be more representation within the prosecuting?
I think 100%. It's very important. We work from home primarily, so I can't say, if I was in an office, I could see representation. I don't get that experience, unfortunately, but I am aware of other black female prosecutors, black male prosecutors.
My question I was going to say is, when you were coming through, did you, because I know you said from an early age, you were like, I want to do this. Do you know what I mean? And you said just the wigs and the gowns. We laugh about that. But were there people you met on your way, on your journey? Did anyone inspire you, or was it just, because like I said, some of our guests here didn't have someone to necessarily look up to in that role. So I don't know if that was the case for you. Did you feel like you didn't ever have someone, or did you have people that you...
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have anyone to look up to. I didn't even know who to speak to. Like, how do I get into this? This was me literally on Google, looking this up. How do I do this? What do I need to do this? And then I would look at I would go on law firms and look at photos of their lawyers, and they were primarily white people.
Right.
In maybe every 6 firm you'd see one person of colour.
Right.
In every 6. So it wasn't there. I mean, now it's a lot easier to identify other black lawyers now, or people of colour, because you've got things like LinkedIn, which is quite helpful, and Instagram. I've seen, like, there's certain lawyers that have got their pages and they've grown a following, and they're doing outreach and all that sort of stuff. So it's a lot easier now. But even then, I feel like if someone was to start, where would they look first? And this is why things like this is important. It's because it might be a listener that listens to this podcast might be like, oh, actually, I want to do what she's done. Let me actually go on Instagram and find these people that she's talking about. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Or go on LinkedIn and build my network. Yeah.
You're the second person. I think the second or third person we've had on here who said exactly that. Yeah. That kind of, where do I go? We had she runs a production company. She said, she's like, there's no way to find this information out. And then you add the other barriers on top, it just becomes really difficult to go, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I speak to? And like you said, it's Google. And then it's learning by, like, trial by fire. You know what I mean? It's just learning as I go, learning the hardest way, if you like. Do you know what I mean? And then when you have your story, it doesn't get passed on. Or it isn't passed on efficiently.
Yeah.
I think it's also about firms being more savvy about kind of where young people look for their information as well. Because whilst LinkedIn is a brilliant platform, primarily it's people that are in employment already that are kind of using it to kind of, talk about kind of opportunities, yes, but usually within that kind of area where people are already working. So young people, most certainly young people I'm working with, wouldn't necessarily access that as a platform, but they might access another platform. And I think it's about firms being more savvy about the areas that they target, so that young people are privy to the information or able to access it in such a way that's easy for them, via a phone or whatever the device might be.
I think that's as well for us, because at the end of the day, a lot of this is around, a lot of stuff we discuss is always around sort of business and stuff, and it's interesting that you say that, because for me, again, it's an odd one in terms of how do we get, because of the current economic standing that we're in at the moment. It is sort of, okay, how do we give people the feeling that there is actually some sort of employment, some sort of hope, some sort of situation, especially for the youth that are coming through. I don't know what you found for yourself, but it's interesting and intriguing for us, because even working with local councils, they're looking to get involved, but they don't seem to know where and how. And they're desperate in a one way to say, we want to be involved, we want to be seen to be involved in these things. But a lot of times, some of them don't seem to have access, unless they have certain people who have access, and then they try and hopefully get everything through them. So I don't know if there's anything that you, just like you said now, with being more savvy, is there anything that you think people could do, or companies could do, or local government could do, or if you like, all the way down to Westminster, like what could be done to improve the situation so that young people have some motivation for what's to come,
Yeah.
as opposed to.
So one of the things that Islington do very well, in my opinion, and I've worked there for 23 years, they're very good at kind of being trailblazers with things. So they were the first borough to do kind of apprenticeships for young people within the council department. So whether it be council tax parking, there'd be admin roles, and that was a real big boon for young people because they're one of the biggest employers, if not the biggest employer in the borough. Outside of Arsenal, say for instance. And we have lots of initiatives, like we work very closely with Arsenal in the community. So, I've been working with them before my son got there. So I'd already had those relationships. And a lot of our young people will work in the stadium doing match day caterings, for instance. So via a company called Delaware North. So they'll get trained up to serve food and, do silver service. So there's those kind of links that boroughs can make with big employers, but also themselves, thinking about all the departments that they have, and in particular for care leavers I'm talking about, because they are responsible for them. But then the wider population, there should be opportunities for them as well, because obviously people that live in the borough, if they have, if you buy into the borough in such a way that you've got a job there, maybe you have a house there, right, you're paying stuff in, you tend to want to look after that better than you do if you're not. That's what I think anyway. I think if you've got an investment in something, you tend to look after it a little bit more. And I think sometimes young people find themselves at odds with the criminal justice system because they have no investment in the area that they live in terms of when they look out in a borough. And lots of London boroughs are quite affluent, right? So you can be walking down a road and you see these lovely 3-4 story, and then behind them there's an estate tucked away. And so it's kind of like you're always moving between these two disparities. Yeah. And if you're a young person maybe that's really struggling with school, you're not really sure about what you want to do, you lack some your functional skills qualifications or your GCSEs or stuff, and you're thinking, well, how am I ever going to get any of this? That must be quite a struggle as well, because you never really believe in that you can actually get on the ladder, get a grip of something, and so necessarily you necessarily don't have an investment in quite the same way, and that's a real struggle, I think, for young people.
I think there's something intrinsic about being part of the administration in some shape or form and getting an insight into how things actually work, what's actually put in, and
how do we make change anyway? Because if you're not in it, it's very difficult to change it. Being in it, understanding how it works, affecting change on the ground, as you say, kind of encouraging people to think differently about, what they perceive as being a barrier, about how you can surmount it. And sometimes you have to be in it and around it to understand how the cogs work, Exactly that, how the cogs work.
I think there's someone said, I think that's an interesting fact that, not that I want to start a revolution, but they said that I think it's something like a big majority of revolutionaries, a lot of them were lawyers before they became revolutionaries. So,
just saying.
But it speaks to, it's great, it speaks to the idea that, like you said, knowing the cogs.
Yes.
It's like people who actually understand how some of this stuff works can actually then go, listen, it's not just about being upset, this is how it works and this is how we can get it to be better. Do you know what I mean? In that sense. So I think there's a lot to be said about actually understanding. But
there's a frustration in everyone when you kind of butt heads with a system that you don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Then it's just the fact that in many ways you'll be ignorant of the system because you don't know anything about it. But the minute you start understanding it, you kind of find ways to navigate it.
Yeah.
But you have to engage with it.
Yeah.
In order to make any change, really.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair.
And it's also about changing your perspective of how you, like you said, was going back to youth. If they don't understand the police system, they see it as it's against us. And in some instances it is. But you've got to learn to work around that. And that's why it's important that people personally take it upon themselves. Like anyone in a professional position should be willing to share your story with other people, put yourself out there and have people reach out to you. Because I think if someone feels like they can come and have a conversation with you as a professional, find out how you got to where you are without any intervention or anything like that from a company, if they can come to you directly on your Instagram or something, I think that young people will see that actually these people are approachable. They're not horrible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's quite important.
Yeah, and it is about, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier on, about how there's this perception of pretty much everything we do and engage with, that it's something that's a little bit out there. It's not for me. I don't really know the people. The police are always, I'm always going to be suspicious of the police or whatever. But if you engage with the right person in that service, Your perception can change immeasurably about, when you were saying about, there's some policemen that are so invested in their job, they do take the time to give you the detail about an individual rather than just, putting them in one box and saying that's just it, And so sometimes I think it's really important the first person you meet in an organisation, what that means for you, what was that interaction like, because it could either bring you in or it could just turn you away. And I think organisations have to be aware of that, because any people facing service have to pick those people really carefully, that can engage, can understand, empathetic about people's situations. Otherwise it can turn you away.
And representation matters.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think in all professions, walks of life, you should have a representation of this country, which is people of all colours, people of all ages, because someone's going to be able to relate to someone. Right. I think that's important.
And so with the other thing, going back to Islington, I think they're really forward thinking. So, we took 9 girls to Brazil, we did a TV documentary, 2-part documentary. Now, not many boroughs would do that, And we went to Brazil and then we came back and then we went to the Olympics because they had the World Cup and the Olympics. And so that for me, that was another opportunity where I thought I could take some young people out of their comfort zone. Take them to somewhere. We lived on a favela, they experienced all that. And it's really thinking about how they could change things that they really struggled with. So they were like, oh, we're in a really bad position. But when they met some of these other kids, so there's 19 countries from all around the world come together to play a mini World Cup, which is what they do at every World Cup, right? Just to highlight street-connected children and their difficulty in, birth certificates, passports, travel documents, right? Because quite often they're being born in villages, far, so you don't record stuff like this, and so they can't travel. So there was all those logistics to get by. Firstly, then you go out, and these care leavers thinking, well, I've had the worst life in that known to man, and then they meet other children from. And it was a real eye-opener for them. There are always people that are a little bit worse off than you, and there's always going to be people that are a little bit better off than you. It's relative. It's relative to where you are. And so it's so important to take people out of their comfort zone sometimes and get them to really experience it. And Islington are really good like that. So we engage with a project called Grand Mentors, and so it's more about kind of a grandparent kind of idea. So we've had lots of mentoring services, and they nearly always tend to be other young people, or they tend to be. But this idea is about kind of an older, retired professional people over the age of 50 that have kind of had experience of life, do different things. They take kids to museums, they take stuff that they would never generally do. And so they're real good trailblazers like that, in terms of taking up stuff that's a little bit outside the box, kind of gives you a different perspective.
So interesting, because there's obviously just massive amounts of value in everything you're talking about there. And my question is, how has this been communicated? How have decision makers within Islington been convinced that this is worth doing?
So, interestingly enough, so the Leaving Care Service in Islington has had a really interesting transition. So in 2001, I was working for an organisation called Shaftesbury Homes and Arethusa, and we won the tender to run the Leaving Care Service for Islington Council. At that time, councils were tendering out a lot of their services. And we went over as a team from South London. So that's how I got to North London, actually. And I was literally there on a year-long contract, and I was there specifically to raise the attainment levels of our young people against their local population. So they measure, and they're called an OC3 group, SSDA 903s. And what they were doing is measuring the outcomes of education, employment, training against the local populace, right? So kids that were not in care. Okay. And we were struggling then, 33%. We had to get it up to 67.9%, which we did. It was a stretch target, so we earned some money for it. So that was a real good marker about what we could do if we really put our heads to the ground and got it done. And ever since then, because we were charity, we could reach out to all these other organisations and say, actually, we think that's a really good idea. Let's go with it. And over the years, we've built up the ability to go to the people at the top. I speak to directors now, our CEO, I can speak to. They understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, but they also understand that young people need a bigger overarching experience than they've been getting, and that you can necessarily change people's opinions and perceptions if you give them that forum by which they can do that. So you don't keep them in that same channel all the time. You're saying, actually, you can take a left here, go off and do something different, see what it looks like to you. and we're really good at that in Islington. We're really good at kind of reaching out to other organisations and doing that.
That's interesting. I think what's interesting to me, I was going to ask you, is that how much of that still goes on? I think it's a question to both of you in terms of the percentages and targets. How much of your lives is that involved in? So, are either of you in a situation where things are more a matter of we've got to hit this, we've got to hit that, you've got to have this many things? Is that part of either of your lives at all?
No, not part of mine. No.
Okay. So in terms of when you're looking at cases, it's not a situation where you're expected to either finish a certain amount by a certain time, or you're not under any pressure, and there's no sort of, I don't know, the corporate speakers, SLAs and things like that. In terms of that, you don't have any of that, or not really?
If I get a case, they've just implemented this new scheme of working where they want us to have things done within 7 days, but I don't have a certain amount of cases to look at each day. I think if I did, that would be a bit scary, because then I think some prosecutors would be like, they'd be skipping the finer detail because they just need to hit their target.
Yeah.
So I quite prefer that we don't.
I'm happy to hit it don't, but I just think given the way a lot of things are going nowadays, I just wanted to know if like, to what level different industries have been affected. Because I know in certain, whether we I could pick any industry, but like let's just use medical industries and things like that. Targets get set that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the industry or the people involved. It's just about we need to show people that this is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it'd come into your world as well, or if there's an.
I think a little bit, but it's not negative because we're obviously funded by the public purse. So our managers are very big on making sure that we are not wasting public money by pursuing cases that have no legs. They are very, this is what people don't realise, how many times we are told, if a case doesn't have any legs, let it go. Do you know what I mean? Unless it's like a victim in something, if it's like a stabbing, for instance, and there's no evidence, we will hound the police, like, is the evidence there? If it's not there, then unfortunately we have to let that go. But then you've got an injured person. But if it's cases where there's no victim, then they're like, if the evidence isn't there, then it's gone. So
that's how you guys. I guess that's how you guys keep a level of efficiency by not trying to take on too much just for the sake of taking on too much.
And this is why, they want us to prepare things within 7 days because they want us to identify early what the chances are of this case progressing to court, or that if there's we call it a realistic prospect of conviction. If we find that there's not, we can either go back to the police and ask for more. If not, then we drop the case. Okay. So it's just about early preparation.
In terms of what you specialise, are you just doing criminal prosecution, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there in terms of what's funded by the public purse? I'm just asking because I actually haven't thought about this. Are other specialties of law also funded by the public purse, or do you guys tend to
legal aid? Okay. Yeah. So criminal defence. I mean, you can pay privately for a lawyer, but you can also get legal aid, which is public purse. Other sectors mainly they are private. Yeah, but it's mainly crime.
Okay, mainly that's interesting. Yeah. In my head, I never thought of that. I never thought. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the case, but let me just ask. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then for yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean because of the environment that I'm in, then there are always kind of KPIs they call them, but they're kind KPIs, of exactly. And I think that's quite a good thing in terms of raising kind of standards as well. I mean, yes, it can create a pressurized environment. However, because the outcomes for children in care are quite often bad, I think any motivation to raise those figures should be a good thing. Because I mean, ultimately, we want to bring children through the service that come out the other end and kind of well equipped to lead adult lives. Make a positive contribution to society. Make change. Live valuable lives, rather than kind of some of them that are going through and really struggling with their mental health or postcode worries. And generally you're not going to change everybody's life, but I guess the idea must be that you try and change as many as you can, or you try to equip them with the skills by which they can go on to lead their lives in such a way that it's fulfilling for them, and they contribute to society in such a way that it makes it better for everyone.
Yeah, and you touch upon mental health quite a bit, and obviously it's something universally across the board. Everyone is acknowledging a lot more. So I guess my question is how are you seeing that being acknowledged within your work and what pathways are being opened for these children to gain access to it, if at all?
So, I mean, traditionally, young people struggle to access. So young people under 18 would normally access a service called CAMS, which is Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. But if you think about some of the trauma that young people have suffered, and the reason why they've come into care, quite often they fail to access the service because it's about kind of not wanting to replay that trauma that's happened to you. Mm-hmm. And so quite often they'll tend to want to wait until a little bit later. But by then, of course, the trauma is building up all the time. And so quite often they're entering it in crisis rather than kind of at a time when they're kind of able to kind of make better informed decisions about it. And one of the things that NHS England did is they recognised that young people are failing to access mental health services under 18s. And they have this budget kind of left over, which wasn't being used. And we're thinking, well, what could we do with it? And so one of the things we offer in Islington is a thing called Choice and Control, which is young people can access a bursary of £500 per year to think about what I might like to have in place for me that might help me unstick myself. And so it could be anything. They could buy a bike. They could have music lessons. They could go and have their hair done. Because we kind of, so the idea of kind of brief therapy is about young people being the experts in themselves. And so rather than us saying to them, oh, we think this could help you, it's about then actually, what do you think could help you? And here's a bit of money to think about, could I do some swimming lessons? Could I buy a bike? Could I do an activity that kind of would help me get to that point where I can then access maybe mainstream education or so? So there's a real awareness of the impact of it. And there's some of the practical things that maybe you could do in order to kind of help people make choices for themselves.
From a prosecutor's perspective, obviously you see a lot of diverse cases that come through, and many of which will have intertwined in that mental health issues and stuff like that. And I suppose my question is, not only is that considered within your decision making, obviously it's something that it will undoubtedly be taken into consideration when a case is taken into, but how much does that weigh, and is that something that you have to, once again, get information from the police or?
Yes, the police, primarily, when someone's arrested, there should be a custody record, and they will allude to mental health on that custody record, and that's something that we look out for. Quite helpfully, the Crown Prosecution Service do have guidance for mental health, domestic abuse, so you're never really alone. Mm-hmm. You can go and find, we're supposed to find the guidance, and mentioning in my review that I've considered that guidance, right, which will give me pointers and things to look out for, have those early communications with defence about someone's mental health, right. Prompt defence sometimes to go and get that person assessed by a psychiatrist or a psychologist to make sure that they are getting the help that they need. And once we get them reports, and I can decide if it's in the public interest for that person to be prosecuted. If there's someone suffering from schizophrenia, and they're going through a crisis, I'm not necessarily going to look at them as harshly as if someone had just gone out and done something. Do you know what I mean? Right. So we consider it a lot. There's guidance for it, and we are encouraged to seek that guidance.
I was going to ask both of you, I guess, in different ways. If, cause I mean, I want it to be positive as well, but at the same time, just the realism of every aspect that we're in is, if, let's say, I am a young person. Not said I'm old, but let's say I'm a young person, and I guess you guys can go back and forth about it. But what advice would you give me if I'm young? I have no idea what I want to do. I could easily be involved in bad things as I could be involved in good things. And what advice would you hand out to me in certain situations? So, in first instances, what's on offer for me in terms of things that will help me, maybe, as you said, look up into mainstream education or mainstream employment or apprenticeships, and then what advice can you give me in terms of, all right, this is what happens if I find myself in trouble, if I find all things that can help me stay out of trouble, or things that I didn't know would be available to me, that will help me to stay out of trouble if I get in certain situations that I can protect myself with. I guess if that's, sorry to put you guys on the spot like this, but it's just the idea. Only because as well for us in this podcast as well, it's like I want people to really get a grasp of certain aspects of not just what you do, how you do, but how it affects their lives as well, and how it can affect their lives. And some of it's like some people won't ever need, hopefully never need some of this advice, and that's great too. But there's people who do. So whoever wants to start that off, they can start that off.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think I touched on it just before about kind of young people being the experts in themselves. Mm-hmm. And so what I try to do is I try to keep like a plethora of opportunities around education, around employment, around training opportunities, but also thinking about all the organisations that I can work with that will offer maybe a 1 day, a 2 day taster, a 3 day taster, also being very flexible in those opportunities. So is it a young person can only manage 1 day? If that's it, great. They do 1 day, and then we build it up to 2 days. Then we build it up to, so I work with people that can offer those opportunities first and foremost, because I think like the jump from maybe not finishing year 11 and getting no GCSEs to employment is a big leap for young people. They struggle mainly, not necessarily around their confidence levels, but it's that kind of idea that, everybody else is educated and I'm not, and I struggle with my writing, or I struggle with understanding, and then I struggle with computers even though I'm brilliant at gaming, say for instance. And quite often young people say, I'm really good on computers, and then you say, well, what about Excel and what about PowerPoint and then they're really talking about gaming, right? And so then it's kind of saying to them, well, actually, what's your interest? What are you interested in? Because you touched about medicine. It's a bit like that. I don't want to be the pharmacist who you come to and I give you a remedy, because actually you know yourself better than I do. Tell me what it is that you're really interested in, and once you've told me that, I can go and find the opportunity for you. And I think it's really important to remember that quite often we're doling out kind of ideas of what we think a young person might like without actually asking them what they're really interested in, what they really like doing. And quite often it's because they think that it's just a hobby. Well, yeah, but quite a lot of things are hobbies, but they could turn into something else. Yeah. But you also need the fundamentals of being able to live as well. And so you do need to go out there and do something that can keep you going whilst you pursue your hobbies, which could then turn into something that you really want to do. And that's really important, that you've got to kind of be earning, because even, to hire studio space, although this is a free space, but most studio spaces you have to pay for. So how are you going to do that? To pursue your hobby, which might lead to then the thing that you really want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. That's fair enough.
And I would advise young people, you're never by yourself. I think it takes a village to raise a child. I've always been big on that. And I think it is the community's job to help children. And if a child wants advice, seek a mentor, get out of your house, go and the councils are very good at providing you information. Okay. They have careers advisors at councils and stuff like that. You'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct.
Access these services. Think about what you want, just like you said, because no one can tell you what you want to do but you. And then find someone that's in that field. Go on Instagram, find someone and reach out to them and say, look, I need a mentor. Can you help me? There's mentor programs, like search for these things. You have to be proactive yourself in order to get to your destination, but there is help along the way. It's just you taking that first step to find it.
That's all great. I mean, I think as well, what's interesting what both of you are saying, I think as well, especially for young people, and not just young people, I think everyone, I think given the way the world is at this current point, it's also a matter of being flexible. I think the fact that you said what I liked really there was, you've got to earn, you've got to keep earning, but then in this game at the moment, I think people have to understand that even though it gets used a lot, the term entrepreneur, do you know what I mean? But you've got to be entrepreneurial in your ways, do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't, just because something's not exactly as you want it to be and exactly the way it is, you've got to be flexible enough to be like, okay, you know what, I'm doing a bit of this, I'm doing a bit of this, I'm doing a bit of this. And like you said, and then hopefully, the thing that you love the most becomes everything, do you know what I mean? But I think in like whilst you're building towards that, be flexible with everything that you have.
I think we touched on it earlier before we started about this idea that you see all this stuff like on Insta and stuff where people just seem to have gone from nothing to something. And
it's not real.
What they don't show is all the hard work in between. They're working for hours, toiling away, doing stuff. Yeah. And I think sometimes you can be duped a little bit by that. And that's not to say that everyone can't be entrepreneurial in that way and create a space for themselves, but it takes time, it takes effort, and you've got to earn money while you're doing it, you know, and particularly for kids maybe that I work with who are having to manage their own flat at such a young age. You know, how do you pay all the bills, you know? And so there is that underlying need to bring some income in some way, even if it's not the thing you necessarily want to do. And that's what I was talking about. Then have your hobby alongside it, which you can then turn into maybe the thing you really want to do.
Definitely agree. I think a lot of young people look at the end goal and they don't consider the steps to get there. I think the steps to get there are more important than the end goal. Yeah. So figure out what you want to do and ask for help to get there.
Yeah. I mean, that messaging is just the most essential thing, especially in this day and age. Everything is, as you said, the glossy finish. And that glossy finish is such an appealing answer. It's like just, you know, the easy thing, but as anyone who's been anywhere, created anything, created any career, understands that up and downs are natural and should be sought out, to be honest, because it's those downs where you kind of find yourself. You understand how you are in certain situations, so that you can bounce back and, you know, these situations reoccur, and you've already accustomed yourself to it. You've been through it, and it's
resilience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we talked about that as well, you know, and thinking about the video content that I do around resilience and stuff, and one we did with a young boxer was his first loss that he suffered. And one of the things he said is, I really needed to lose to know how much I wanted it. Yeah. It was so, you know, like he had to lose it because he kind of was just coasting along. Right. And he had a loss, and it was like, wow, actually I really needed this loss in order to realise how much I wanted this and how much I need to work to make sure that I get it, you know. And so sometimes it's this thing about kind of instant gratification against delayed, you know, and sometimes we just want it so badly now rather than kind of thinking about, you know, it might take us a couple of years to achieve it, you know.
I definitely agree, and this is one of the reasons why I left London to go into law, because I could have stayed and I could have kept applying. I knew the statistics were really high. I knew that there might be one job and like 3,000 applicants. Am I going to keep fighting for that job, or am I going to think out of the box, go outside of London, where in some instances I probably was a token, but I used that to my advantage, and now I'm back where I wanted to be, back in London.
Exactly that. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Sometimes exactly you've got to think outside.
The path doesn't have to be everyone else's path. It doesn't have to be. It's being flexible and being resilient. Like I think both of you have talked about and experienced yourselves. That's what allows you guys to be where you guys are. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what's important for me is to make people understand that, look, there are some amazing people doing amazing things as yourselves are, and if you like you said, if you search out these people, seek out these people, they'll put it in plain English for you that this is how it goes, and your journey is going to be different from what you might see on socials and rest of it, but you will make it provided you do these things. So that's why I love hearing from you guys. Some of these things, it's just like it's the same thing of, it doesn't have to be the straightforward journey, but trust me, you'll get there. Do you know what I mean?
And it's worth it in the end.
Well, you're evidence of it. You guys are living evidence of it. Does that make sense? And that's what's most, rather than I could sit here and just be like, guys, well, I know a person that did this, and I know, but you guys are actually the embodiment of it. You're here, and living proof that it does happen that way. So that's what's important for me to have you guys doing these types of things. That's the main thing. But we're gonna move on to a little segment of the show, Cherelle, the podcast. It's called Prove Me Wrong. This section's called Prove Me Wrong, where myself and Alex will be playing devil's advocate, asking our hosts questions close to their heart, giving them the opportunity to navigate the tricky waters of today's whataboutism and the ignorance posted in most comment sections. Now, before I say anything, these are not my thoughts and not my views, guys. But it's meant to challenge you, all right? Okay. So just in case, I don't want anyone swinging for me when I say anything or anything like that. But since you're across from me, I'll start with you. I'll start with yourself. So I guess the way I'd put it is, to be honest, you talk about how things used to be, and I think people just used to work a lot harder, to be honest. I think, to be honest, most of the time nowadays, just the youth are probably just lazy. They probably got more opportunities and they just don't take them. How do you feel about that?
I think every generation is different. And I think every generation has its differences. And I think if you talk to your parents as I talk to mine, they would say, yes, they had it much harder. But then they wouldn't know what knife crime was, and they wouldn't know what postcode wars were, and they wouldn't. So they wouldn't necessarily know the idea. So one of the things I say to young people is part of the reason why maybe we didn't struggle, say, with worrying about what people said about us, for instance, is because when I was younger, someone actually had to come up and say that to me. They couldn't send it to me down a phone. It couldn't be written about me on something because we had no devices to access that sort of stuff. And so you get a lot of this stuff, in particular stuff around body dysmorphia and stuff like that, where, you know, people are shaming people for what they look like, and that's. But where do you access it all? We couldn't access that in that way, so I never worried about what people were saying. You had to come up to me, to my face, and say that to me if you wanted to say something. You know, in much the same way as, you know, if you met your mates and you agreed to meet somewhere, you had to be there. You couldn't pick up the phone and say, I'm running 10 minutes late. You just had to be there in the hope that they were going to be there as well. You know, so I think every generation has its different struggles. Could you make more money these days now? Probably. Maybe there are a lot more opportunities. But it doesn't mean to say that there's a lot more opportunities for everyone, because as you've proven, you had to leave London to go somewhere to get your opportunity. So, yeah, I just think every generation struggles with it.
Thank you. Cherelle, I was going to say to you, so why does it matter in terms of, you said earlier about, you know, coming from East London, being a woman. I said, why does it matter? Surely justice is just blind and it should just be case on case. Why does your experience matter at all?
My experience matters because I relate to women who come from where I come from, women who look like me, women who think like me. And equally, if it was a black male, an Asian male, they have people that relate to them. I would never want a prosecution that's got everybody's the same from the same background, because they're not going to understand you. There's certain things that have happened even in my line of work that some lawyers wouldn't know what that was. And because I'm from there, the streets, so to speak.
Definitely not the streets. Definitely not the streets.
I understand certain things that they wouldn't understand, and I can verify that, no, this is actually true. So I think it's important that, especially in prosecution, that there is representation.
Can I just chime in on that one as well? Because I think women have had a long struggle anyway, you know, just to try and get on parity with men and kind of get the same opportunities. And most certainly in my day, a lot of women were still at home. They weren't really working. So it's a bit like, there's a double struggle for women in many ways, women of colour, but women just generically in terms of thinking about the world of employment as well. And
can I just say, I'm so proud to be from where I am, because if even one young black woman looks at me and thinks I can do that because she did that, then I've won. So
okay, amazing. Thank you.
Amazing.
Like I said, that wasn't my views, guys.
No, interesting.
Because you were like,
but
really? I was like, guys. It happens every time I ask this question. Everyone kind of looks at me like, where did you get that from? Everyone's like, where did you get that idea from? Like, no, guys, we can do this. All right, and then a last bit now, guys. It's just a fun, quick fire round, okay? This is the quick fire round. No ifs, buts, or maybes. No long explanations. Just one answer. You're going to try and ask me what I mean. I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to ask. You're just going to have to answer the question as I say it. Right? Yeah.
Say it with your chest.
It's just nice and fun, nice and fast, and it's been fun listening to everyone's answers. And it's personal to you, so don't worry about it. You're not going to get judged. Okay? So it's just fun and games. So I'll start with something very simple: beach or city?
Beach.
Both.
You can't choose. Draw the line. This is what I love about this quick fire.
No
beach then. Yeah, beach.
Beach. 9 to 5 or 10 to 6?
10 to 6.
Yeah, 10 to 6.
It's the face everyone gives as well. Jollof rice or rice and peas?
Rice and peas.
I am a Jamaican, but I'm going to say jollof because you can eat it by itself.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Converted.
Nuclear power or fossil fuels? See how you feel, guys. See how you feel.
I think I'm going to go nuclear, I think.
I'm just going to copy him because it doesn't affect.
See how you feel. It's your choice. It's your choice.
I'm just going to say. Yeah.
I went nuclear power. Okay, nice. Quality or quantity?
Quality. Yeah.
Youth or experience?
Youth.
Experience.
Interesting.
How do you get to experience?
I love these questions. Academia or apprenticeship?
Apprenticeship.
Me, I'd agree with that one.
Interesting. Private or public?
Public.
Private.
Sustainability or low cost?
Sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability.
YouTube or Netflix?
Depends on the day.
Netflix.
I'm not giving you guys options. I'm just saying YouTube or Netflix.
I'm going to say YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brick and mortar or online?
Brick and mortar.
Brick and mortar or what?
Or online?
All right, brick and mortar, yeah.
Okay. And the last one is city or countryside?
City or?
Countryside.
Oh, city.
Yeah, city.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, guys. That's it. That's the end of the Rapid Fire round.
Amazing.
That was fun.
Well, with that, we'll be signing off this episode of the BOLO Business Podcast. Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you so much, Cherelle, for joining us. This has been another inspirational chat, diving through your experiences. Thank you so much for sharing. I think there's so much to take from it. For all the topics you touched, and just really, once again, just important that you guys are there representing and understanding and driving change in the ways that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Amazing.
Thank you. Massive respect to you.
Yeah, and you.
Thank you.
Love it. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the BOLO Business Podcast. Remember, the journey doesn't end here. We encourage you to carry these conversations forward, share your thoughts with us on social media, and most importantly, apply the insights gained today in your own spheres of influence. Stay tuned for more compelling discussions that transcend boundaries, bridge cultures, and celebrate the richness of diversity. Please subscribe, share, and until next time, this is the BOLO Business Podcast, signing